Nick, it is awesome to see you again. It's been probably 6 weeks since we had our first conversation. We have made it through the Christmas holiday. We have made it past the new year, and we are in to 2024. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I mean, we talked a little bit about in the pregame, right? Last time I saw you, you're in a hotel. The pool was behind you. It looked wonderful. You're in Arizona, complaining it's cold in the 40s. I'm sitting here in Chicago. It's 32. It's snowing, and then it's going to turn to rain. But I'm bullish on 2024, 2023 ended really well for us as an organization. Personally, as my family, I think it ended really well for us, and my clients. So I think 2024, aside from all the mishigash that's going to happen towards the end of the year with the election, and I'm staying out of that, I think it's going to be a good year if you're doing the right stuff.
Yeah, we said no holds barred on this
Right.
conversation. I don't know that we want to get into the election discussions.
I would
I don't know
not.
that
No,
I'm
I'm
prepared
just,
to get
yeah,
into that.
I
Yeah,
just put out there as a place setter. And
yeah.
the one thing I will say for your listeners, and I'm telling all my clients that if you're dealing with cost of acquisition, your lead generation is coming from social media, it is going to be more and more and more expensive as we get closer to November. So find other sources, right? And I know you're the go-to-market expert, right? So find other sources of lead generation because we saw costs go up in 2023 for all of our clients, cost per lead, right? Cost per client, CAC, and it's going to be worse if it's just through the Facebooks, the YouTubes, TikTok or TikTok as the kids call it, and the gram, right? So it depends on where you're getting your folks, and I just think it's going to be interesting. But
Why will
other
the
than that,
why will the cost increase as we get closer to the election period?
because people are going to be buying more and more space, right? They're going to be buying more and more eyeballs. I think it's the acquisition cost, right, for them trying to get more and more and more eyeballs and attention as we get closer to November is going to be, and it's not just the
Sure.
president, but it will be localized businesses too, right? So people are just going to be fighting for that proverbial dollar. In the old days, it was media, right? And so they would buy up all the TV time, right? They would buy up all of the radio time. They would buy up all the print advertising and some of the newspapers. And you probably have some young listeners because you're in the SaaS world. They don't even know what a newspaper is, but that stuff all got bought up. And so I think that's what you see now with social media, and it is what it is. And I
Yeah.
think that will also people will stop, right? They'll stop listening because there'll be so much chatter, good, bad, or indifferent. There'll be chatter, and then people are like, I'm just gonna chill and veg and watch Netflix until January.
Yeah,
So
it's a really important piece to highlight for folks because sometimes you think, well, hey, we're not in that area or we're not talking about these things. So we're not going to be influenced or impacted by the noise, but it's additional noise. It's additional limited space. So it's going to create some issues where cost will increase. It never even crossed my mind that that would be something to be thinking about. So Nick, thanks for bringing it up.
yeah, and I think it will, budgets might freeze a little bit, right? Is
Sure.
they'll be
Yeah.
saying, okay, let's wait to see what happens as you get closer to Q3, right? If I was a business owner or a sales leader or listener to your show,
Yeah.
I'd be saying I always got to put the foot on the pedal, but you even got to put it on the pedal even more so because budgets may freeze a little bit as you kind of get into Q4 because they'll be unknown, right?
Yeah.
And once then known is then money doesn't like unknown, right? It's just like as traders will tell you, right? Money doesn't like unknown, they like known. And so with that will be opportunity for those that are thinking about it. And we're doing this with a lot of our clients, and I'm sure you're doing it with your clients. We're doing risk assessments, right?
Yep.
And it's a conversation for 2024 for all of our clients of what happens, what does it look like, and doesn't mean that it will, and it doesn't mean that we're kind of projecting it. It just means that it's just smart planning. And as leaders, especially GTM leaders like you and your team, you got to be thinking about that at all times, right? And so that's our job as leaders to kind of look through the tea leaves. We get caught up in the minutia, but sometimes we got to rise above it. And that's what the beauty of the work that you do, and the beauty of like this podcast, what allows people to think differently.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, a lot of times sales leaders, revenue leaders, whether you're sales or success or marketing or wherever you sit in that kind of revenue equation, you don't like talking to the CFO inside the business for whatever reason. You just
Right.
avoid the CFO, you avoid the controller, you avoid those people on that side. And you create this kind of adversarial relationship rather than building a relationship. The point that Nick just made relative to risk is one of the primary reasons building that relationship with that person is really powerful. And just asking them that question, how do you think of risk? How do you assess risk? What are some of the things that you're considering? And you can learn a lot about their perspective just by asking those questions. And it doesn't have to be the discussion around how am I going in there for budget or what are we doing relative to comp plans. Let's just have a conversation around risk and risk assessment. This is what they do really, really well. What do you think, Nick?
They do this 24/7. They're constantly thinking of it. And certainly they're programmed to no versus yes, right? And we as salespeople want people programmed to yes versus no. And it's just the nature of kind of a yin and the yang of the business personalities, if you will. And we coach our sales folks, right? So we have different components of our business. One of our components is sales leader coaching, and we get a lot of
Yep.
young leaders that kind of got into, they were maybe really good producers, and then they got promoted to the sales leader, right? As we joke, right? Friday, they're the number one performer. On Monday, they're now the sales leader. Nothing's changed, right? They don't have the toolkit to deal with this, but they'll then get the questions, if you will, from the CFO, the controller, whoever's doing it, depending on the size of the business, right? And they'll think it's a personal attack. And ours is like, no, this conversation is going on across the United States and Europe and everywhere in every size business. Even if it's a mom and pop, they're going to ask the questions. And so don't think of it's a personal attack. It's just their business. It's their business responsibility, right? And I probably felt the same way maybe as a young sales executive, right, in my first couple roles, but I had the blessing of having some really good CFOs and treasurers and controllers that I worked with. And, one of them pulled me aside once and said, on your side of the equation, you guys get emotional about the deal and you have to, because that's what keeps the energy going and moving it forward. Our job is just to make sure that it's a good deal, right? It doesn't mean it's that we're fighting each other. We just have to ask the questions. You're on third base. We're still in the batter's box. Let's make sure that we're bringing everything together. So I think your point, Mike, is so critical of having those conversations. Go knock on the door, send them an email, say, hey, let's just talk real quick. Where are you seeing risk? This is something that I'm thinking about. This is something that maybe I want to make sure that I'm providing you good feedback that we're hearing from the field. Because as sales leaders, as marketing leaders, GTM leaders, if you will, or chief revenue leaders, we have the benefit of having the boots on the ground, right? The troops that are there that can get immediate feedback from the marketplace or the email responses or whatever that is. And so we have the benefit of having, here's what's going on. And knowing like surprises in businesses, right? We always, our crystal ball was 100%, clear, but it's not. But providing that feedback. And I think that's important to always do as a sales leader. And some of that comes with maturity, right? And some of that just comes with, well, this better than I probably, the average tenure of a sales leader, it used to be about 18 months. It's probably shortened up a little bit, right? So people are nervous and they don't like to bring bad news. I'm a firm believer, just like you said, you got to manage risk, but you also have to manage the messaging. And the messaging, a portion of the messaging could be bad news. And you constantly have to be out there managing that and saying, here's what we're hearing. Facts and figures, right? It's not emotional. This is just kind of what we're hearing in the marketplace.
Yeah. And most recent number I saw was 14 months. So it just keeps shrinking and keeps shrinking. And it's unfortunate because when you think about, I mean, what is 14 months? Yeah, you go into an organization and you're thinking, okay, what's my 30, 60, 90? And before you know it, now you've got 11 months to do something else or some kind of change. And typically if it's 14 months, a decision actually was probably made is maybe 2 to 3 months before that. So now your time horizon is even shorter as you go through there. And if you're going to improve execution, you need to simplify. You're not going to go through this by doing a lot of things or adding complexity. I do want to keep drilling into this CFO discussion, as
Sure.
one of the things we're talking about here is the negative information. CFOs also look at risk on the positive side. If you
Oh, of
go
course.
right through your forecast and blow the number out, you've now put additional risk on the business, and that the business is not able to invest in areas, take on additional risk that they might do,
Sure.
maybe hire, like all of these things. So have that conversation with the CFO, and you get more information about their perspective, how they operate the business, how they think about operating the business. And that perspective is going to be different than yours, just like Nick was talking as he was talking through that.
Yeah, if you think about any business, right, especially if they're technical,
Yeah.
what's their number one bandwidth issue is hiring technicians, right? And it's hiring good people. So that goes to your point exactly, Mike. It's just, if they don't have the capacity and all of a sudden now you're blowing out your budget, well, you're gonna do damage to the brand. You're gonna have unhappy customers. You're gonna have pressures on cash flow as you're maybe having to go about it and hire temporary workers, which are more expensive, right? And is not a good long-term solution. So, it's the totality in the seasons of business. And I think as sales leaders, you have the benefit of the windshield, but also the rearview mirror, right? Because you kind of see where you've been and you kind of know where you're going. And the key is be there, right? And have those conversations. And maybe that goes back to the 14 months. Maybe it's that we don't take that, that seat at the table that, I'm not saying we don't take it that we take it, but we take it with a grain of salt. And maybe we have to kind of start saying, okay, here's what's going on, and here's why we need to be that. I just saw something the other day, and I'm sure you saw this too. The average CEO does not think that they're aligned with the VP of marketing. And I
Oh,
think it was
okay.
only 34% of them thought that they were aligned.
Mm.
How does a business run, right? If the two of them are not aligned, right? And it could be that the marketing folks are they're at this level, right? Where the CFO is at this level and the CEO is at this level, right? And I'm lifting my hands for those that are listening. But why is that, right? And that goes back to the problem we just talked about at 14 months as the sales leader. 14 months, come on, man, you're not doing anything, right? You're just unless you came in from the ranks and file. If you're brand new to the organization, it takes you, as I joked, it takes you 90 days to find the bathroom, right? Just know where the political landmines are,
Right.
as well as, everything else. So that's why we like what we do, right? Because of the fact that we don't get involved in the politics. We're just here to kind of drive the number. But it's a real thing. And it's even realer on the marketing side of the business because there's no alignment, right? And why is that? And it's interesting. And this was an article, I think, off the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
Uh, and, so it wasn't like it was a randomized poll in LinkedIn, right? Where four
Mhm.
people answered it and, one said one and then the other three said something else. So therefore the number skewed. But that's a real number and that's a real issue. And, how do we get alignment? How do we get growth? And, goes back to the CFO. The CFO is constantly thinking about acquiring new customers. And we have the analogy that we think the biggest expense in any business, it's not cost of goods, it's not labor, it's not anything. It's just the cost of missed sales, right? Because that's your future bank, right? That is, there is, it puts such pressure on the business if you're not feeding that new sale funnel, obviously, right? So what are you doing to work on that and make sure that that bucket is the holes in that bucket is filled?
So let's go a little bit deeper into the alignment piece. Like, what are some of the things that work in order to test or assess or inform whether or not we're aligned?
I think the first thing to do is, does the organization have a really good scorecard,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
What does it look like? And the metrics that a marketing manager and marketing team may at are a lot different than really what the C-suite cares about, right? They don't care about email open rates, right? But that's important, right? That's important. They don't care about marketing qualified lead versus sale qualified lead, right? Because they always fight and they always never make sense anyway. They care about the bottom, what did we sell and who do we sell it to, right? So what is the right thing that we're going after? And I'm not saying that it's an easy job as the VP of marketing. And I guess if we peel back that onion, that turnover rate used to be 18 months. is probably being compressed down even more. It's probably closer to 12 months, right? And they're dealing with brand promise and brand recognition and all that other stuff. But really, you know, awareness is one thing and it's good to measure it, but it's probably what are the three core things that every CEO and CFO want to know from their marketing director, their VP of marketing. If it's a small organization, what do they want to know? And then that goes on our scorecard. Right. And I think that's the first thing. Right. So let's all align, let's all agree. Right. And if we're going to change strategies or initiatives or metrics, then that has to go. My last big corporate role, I was a VP of marketing for about $100 million division, right? Well, every meeting you went to, everybody wanted a piece of your budget, right? Every meeting you went to, you had stakeholders or product line managers or whomever all needing marketing. Well, you had a staff of X, right? So you had bandwidth issues. And so we need to say, great, I don't want to anger everybody, but what are we going to agree upon, right? So, do the typical matrix that we all learned in business school. Where are my cash cows? Where are my stars? Where are my question marks? And where are my drags, right? And so, what are we funding over the course of time? Where are we putting our money? What new products are we launching into the marketplace? What's an agreeable acceptance rates of new product launches? How do we measure success around here? And if you don't have if you don't have yes, yes, and yes, and yes to all of those questions, you're going to be sunk, right? You're going to be sunk and you're going to be stressed and you're going to be running around with a chicken with a head cut off.
And there's a couple of things to take away from what Nick shared right there that just jump out immediately. But number one, make sure you're asking more questions. Don't worry as much about the information that you're conveying or sharing. Start first with the questions. If you ask the right questions and you keep asking questions and validating and understanding and confirm that there's this alignment, then you'll be in a better position to share information in context. Make sure you ask the right questions. And if you happen to be inside an organization where you're not able to ask those questions, maybe you should accelerate that 14 or 18 or
Sure.
12-month thing and work your way out of it. Because if you're not going to be able to ask those questions, then you're going to be constantly pushing uphill and things are going to continue to change. But really like this discussion around alignment, and whether it's a business or a car, if you're out of alignment, you can start to see the impact. People get kind of pulled or dragged in one way or the other, and then people overcorrect and start going the other way. And that creates more of that risk that we were talking about from a CFO perspective. So drive that piece of alignment. Where, Nick, when you're working with organizations like you've had a chance to work with, or even back in the W-2 days, where did you typically see the greatest risk for misalignment that people didn't realize?
The first one was when you had people kind of going off the reservation, right?
Yeah, sure.
Or not doing what you just said, right? Which was ask the proverbial questions, right? Go deeper on the questions and just saying, okay, beginning of the year, here's where we think we're going. We know and I've been blessed. I've worked with some great CFOs. They always say, hey, listen, we probably aren't going to this is where we have to go, right? And we're probably not going to get there with the straight line, and we know that, but it's going to go like this, and it's going like this, and it's going to go like this. And so we all have to be in agreement and alignment that it's going to be bumpy to get there, right? But we have to get there, right? Because last W-2 came out of a private equity, right? And so this was our number, and there was bond covenants and there was loan covenants and there were certain things that had to happen because of that. You realize that, okay, this is the playbook that I have. And so
Right.
I got to constantly be doing at this. The next thing is when we just don't go at things with facts, but we become emotional about stuff, right? Or we give our
Yeah. Yeah.
opinions about stuff. And I was just on the phone with a client this morning. We were kind of
Yeah.
doing our weekly one-on-one and recap. And he's like, well, something's off. I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. Okay, what do we know? Where is this happening? Because I don't have the facts yet, and I'm not going to give you opinions, right? And I'm not going to give you fiction. And so it's really all based on fact. And as a sales leader, and I talk about this all the time, and I'm sure you do too with your clients and and when you were a W-2,
Yeah.
it's I think the worst thing that we do is we allow fiction to stay in the pipelines. And so therefore, leadership financial leadership, operational leadership is seeing these puffery of fiction, which every salesperson calls their pipeline. We know half of the deals aren't coming through. We just don't want to remove them. We know the time frames are not true, right? So we've elongated time frames. And so how do we get that fiction out of it? And once you get the fiction out of it, then it's fine. I remember it goes back to your thing, how do you get this alignment? How do you get this conversation? I took over immediate for the last company, private equity was recruited as VP of sales, right? Good organization, great brand awareness, good players. Private equity team was phenomenal, right? The leadership team was phenomenal. My first month in the seat, thank God it was the middle of the month. All the salespeople gave me where they projected they were going to finish the month at. Not one of them was even remotely close, right? I'm like, all right, we're stopping that, right? No more if I bring in this forward this way, because decisions are being made, marketing investments are being made, maybe R&D investments are being made. We are bringing new products to the marketplace, and if you think XYZ is going to happen from a financial standpoint, you need to fund those initiatives, and that's what future sales is coming about. So that's the problem, right? So let's all agree, and I should make a sign and I should wear it, right? It's like no more fiction into our pipelines. Get all the fluff out of it. Once you get the fluff out of it and you look at it real, because we're afraid. We're afraid to come at something to say, here's where I'm at, right? Because that might be a little scary. And now we have to kind of hold the mirror to ourselves and say, oh, okay, this is real now, because I know only 30% of it's going to come to close, or maybe it's 20%, or maybe it's 10%, right? And so if I need to bring in 1 million, right, and I only got 300,000 in my pipeline, and I know 100 of that's going to come to fruition, I really am stuck. The other problem, quite frankly, is, and you get this, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of people, we create horrible quota pressure onto our sales teams, right? We give them quotas that are not attainable, right? And then you new people hiring in, okay, here's what your quota is. Your quota is 1 million. Great. Your OTE based on that million is going to be $250,000, blah, 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 blah. Great. How many people are hitting quota? Oh, none of them are, right? Or 10% of them are, or 30% of them. Does that mean that the other 70 or 80 are horrible sellers, or just that we just put unfair quotas onto the marketplace because we have to get to that number, right? We have to drive that number. And I'm all about math, and I'm all about metrics, and I'm all about that number, because that's the language of business. That's the language that we speak around the boardroom, around the executive table, around our department tables. But if it's fiction, then forget it, right? And so we're causing ourselves, flaws. So that's a lot there, right? We can unpack a lot of it. I threw a
Sure.
lot at you, but really it is, let's stop the fiction. And the fiction is on both sides of the equation. The fiction has salespeople and sales leaders and sales managers having fiction in our team's pipelines and in our pipelines. Get that out of it. But has CFOs and has controllers and has people building budgets, right? You got to get that fiction out of your quotas, right? Or of where we want to go, unless we're going to make the investment, right? So, I mean, you hear people talk about this all the time. Okay, what's it going to take to get to that number? Can we make that investment to get to that number? You know, that's it. And that, just you're going to have to be real. And benefit of what we do is we have no emotional attachment. We are emotionally attached to our clients winning, right? But if we see that it's a foul, it's our job to say, this doesn't help me understand, right? Maybe I'm missing something.
Yep.
Has an outside third party, or as a consultant, or has somebody in there on a fractional basis? Where'd you come up with this number?
Yep.
Why do you think that this is attainable? If it's not attainable, right? Even if it's small numbers, we got to have reality in it.
Yeah. There needs to be, and this is not soapbox time, and it's nor is it pontificating about stuff, but there needs to be a realistic perspective from all parties around what we're looking at. And most VPs of sales, VPs of customer success, director level, they might not really know. They might take information at face value, and they might say, okay, because it might be their first couple of bites at the apple, or first couple of times around the track, but they take it at face value, and they work or they operate inside those assumptions. Especially in earlier stage organizations, you make some assumptions, but then you've got to test against the assumptions and see whether or not those things are playing out. when you look in the mirror, whether you're the CFO or you're the CEO or you're the VP of sales or you're the VP of customer success or you're the VP of marketing or the CMO, you know what doesn't kind of feel right. You get that
Yeah.
sense because you've seen the data. And if you don't know and you're tracking the data and it's not aligning with what you're expecting, then you get to a point where you do know and you can start to say something in front of the group and you bring it up and say, look, I'm concerned about X, Y, or Z, or I have questions around X, Y, or Z, or I need another perspective around X, Y, or Z. And when you do those things, you can work in truths rather than fiction.
Yeah.
And we've, from a leadership perspective, I think we've created many of the challenges that we have here. As
I think you're spot on with that, right? I think it's so smart, Mike, that we have created all of these challenges, but it's been around forever, right? I go
Sure.
back to a friend, a family friend worked for Motorola.
Okay.
Genius engineer, right? So I'm not taking anything away from Motorola. I'm just going to use this story to say that we've been doing this forever. This is in the 70s and the 80s. He had patents under him that he was responsible for. He'd talk about meetings and be like, okay, raw material. We have a launch date of in 4 months. Where are we at with raw material? Oh, we can't get it in until 6 months, right? Or 6 weeks, whatever it is, right? So there was all these no's that everybody hear, but then they said, okay, can we hit the launch date of 4 months? Oh yeah, sure. We'll hit it, right? So we've built fiction in, and I think it's just, people don't want to, are we building fudge in, right? So maybe he said 6 months, but it was really 3 months, but he was giving himself some wiggle room, or if it fell short, he had that responsibility. And, listen, our job is always as leaders to put a little bit of pressure, right? A little bit of gas on the organization, a little bit of pressure, but too much then creates that culture of where nobody is candid. Nobody, and there was a great book. I think it was kind of going through your space, which was the software space or the SaaS space and that, which is radical candor, right? And it became kind of Main Street. And it was
Yep.
really, let's have a real conversation, not only kind of about where we're at and where our objectives are, but where are we at as people, where are we at as leaders, where are we at as humans and together. And I think, you could change the zip code. I joke about this all the time. Change the name of the door, change the zip code. Problems are always the same, right? It's
Well,
communication.
and unfortunately, some people read that book. They read Radical Candor, and then they picked what they decided to be candid about inside their organization, or they get
Correct.
themselves into situations where I'll be radically candid in the way that I communicate throughout the organization, but I won't accept it if people are communicating with me
Yeah.
in that manner. So it's I think this point that you just made around, hey, you can change the zip code, you can change the banner, you can change the sign, but you still have the same fundamental challenges. Why do we still have the same fundamental challenges inside organizations?
I think we're hitting on it, right? And I think it's easy to say, and I just think it's not misalignment. I don't believe that, right? I don't think people come to work saying, and, some do, right? A small portion of all organizations do, but I really think it's the portion of them coming to saying, "Hey, I want to do a good job each and every day," but I don't want to bring bad news forward because I don't want to have my proverbial head chopped off, right? Or I don't want to be looked at differently, or I don't want to then be suspect. And it's it starts with leadership, and I'm sure that's the first thing you harp on when you're doing an assessment of people is kind of where are you, where are we at. I do a lot of work with small businesses, small to mid-sized businesses, so if I'm
Sure.
brought in, it's a pretty self-aware leader or founder or business owner that says, I know I can't do this,
Yep.
right? I know I'm not giving XYZ department justice. I know I'm not managing my sales team. I know something is amiss. I know I should be focusing on other things, right? So that it takes a lot of self-awareness. And some of the greatest, business owners, their ego got them to where they are, and that's good, but their ego may not get them to the next level. And I think that's even more so in big businesses, right? There's fiefdoms. Everybody always protected their fiefdoms and their kingdoms. And yeah, I don't want you in my backyard, or well, don't look at me. Let me throw the bomb over on somebody else. And there's always a problem. And are you hiring the right people, right? Are the right people on the boat, are the right people on the bus, whatever phraseology you want to use? Okay, great. Are we all aligned? Okay, great. How are we going to communicate with each other? How are we going to talk to each other? What are we going to do about if we think there is BS or fiction on the table? Can we pull that? All right, what is our truth? What is truth to us? And just how do we move things through? And I think, go back to the radical candor, which is interesting that we got to that conversation. Didn't think we'd be having that, but we do. It's you got to be okay, right, with people asking questions. And you have to ask the questions. And I think you said that really, really well of saying, let's ask the questions. Sales leaders should be asking questions to the CFO. Just be curious, right? You wouldn't have your team do really bad discovery or go off half cocked or only take a little bit and then do a proposal. You would have as detailed a discovery as possible. But we don't do that within our own organizations.
Yeah, there you've hit on a key challenge that a lot of organizations, at least a lot of organizations that I've been fortunate enough to be around and work with, run into, which is we'll set up the structure of how we want to communicate internally. Maybe this is how we're going to communicate, or we're set an expectation in a leadership team, and this is how we're going to communicate and support cross-team collaboration. But then as it moves throughout the organization, the messaging gets lost. But even worse, what ends up happening is there's a leader inside the organization who's leading a sales team or a success team or anybody in the revenue space. And when they're out there helping the team set expectations with clients or trying to get deals done faster, moving things forward, like we just ran through the end of 2023, and they're trying to get some of that stuff that was going to be at the beginning of Q1 done
Yeah.
early in Q4, they end up modeling the behavior that is the exact opposite of what they're trying to create inside the organization. So now we've got this huge disconnect between the way that we operate with our internal customers versus our external customers, and the way that we say the words on what we want to do from a leadership team, but the pressure that we create for our team. So to get back to this piece that we're talking about, and I do want to move into 2024 and talk about some of the things that
Sure.
we're optimistic about, because this is all not doom and gloom, but it is something that every organization runs into it in one way, shape, or form. Even high performing organizations run into it when they try to grow too fast. Be really careful about the way that you communicate. Be really careful about how you reinforce and respond to the way that people ask questions. Reinforce that curiosity. If you want to make that happen inside your organization, if you want to build that culture, you have to cultivate it and you have to reinforce it. The Go back and listen to the pieces that Nick was talking about around the importance of alignment. If you're not aligned, you're going to lack integrity. That works from the standpoint of self. It works from the standpoint of teams. It works from the standpoint of entire organizations. Nick,
Yeah.
let's shift into
So
go ahead.
one last thing, and then we'll go on to 2024. And you have a lot of leaders that listen to this show,
Yeah,
right?
perfect.
And so I always say too, watch what you're putting on your frontline manager's plate. You want them to be focused 75% of their time coaching their teams, working with their individual producers, right? And if you're putting a ton of meetings on or putting a ton of ancillary work, they won't be able to rise up their teams, right? And so we just finished up with I don't know when this will be released, but Michigan just won, right? Michigan beat Washington. Well, there is all these coaches, right? You didn't see Jim Harbaugh running around to the special teams, in the middle of that, so special teams coach focused on the special teams, right? So he just coached those groups. The quarterback coach focused on this, the line coach focused on this, defensive coach focused on this, and then break it down to micros. And so I'm a firm believer that you got to give your managers some breathing room, but some breathing room in their calendar so they could spend that time with the one-on-ones with their team, with the coaching with their team, either individual or has a group of really focusing on moving that player up. And that's a key. And that was a message for the C-suite that you have and your VP level that you have is really look at your frontline leaders, especially on the sales sides, calendars, and take things off with the expectation is it's not that you got free time. It's not like you're going on TikTok, right? It is that you are spending time with your team and you're coaching them and you're listening to calls and you're doing pre and post call reviews and you're doing pre-call planning and post-call postmortems and you really are focusing on that. And that will help you get to your number. So sorry about that. Sorry about that. That was the soapbox. You allowed me a soapbox, Mike. I appreciate that.
There you go. It's an important thing to reinforce, primarily for a couple of reasons. One, if you're there are a lot of leaders who don't have that time. They're not able to make the time because there's more stuff that just keeps coming from on to the to-do list. So reporting on this number or getting involved in this meeting. But the next piece that's important to ask in that environment as well is, do my leaders inside the organization, my frontline leaders, my early managers, do they actually know what coaching is? Do they know how to coach? Are we enabling and empowering them to do that work with their team? So if they don't know what good coaching looks like, then start there. Help demonstrate what that behavior looks like. Go or support the training, reinforce that kind of work. Because sometimes they've just not seen it. They've moved in to that role that Nick talked about earlier, where they killed their number on Friday and now they're leading a team on Monday. Well, over the weekend, they didn't learn how to lead, they didn't learn how to coach. And unfortunately, a lot of them move into those roles. And the poor leaders that are in those roles are the ones who go in there and say, do it the way that I did it.
Yeah,
How to
100%.
my thing. And let's enable and empower our people to get out there and do those things and support them in that part of the journey so that you don't need to replace that leader in 3, 6, 12, 18 months. And even more so, you don't have to replace other people on the team because the people on the team leave because of crap leadership.
You talk about the flywheel
Yep.
for why we have dysfunction, the flywheel for why we're not hitting the number. I think it's all on what we just talked about, right? And
Agreed.
the leaders that are listening to this, I implore you, if you probably don't have the time to coach them on how to just go out and get the coach, right? Go get somebody like Mike or somebody else that could work with them on doing that. And sometimes it's better to have somebody from the outside, right? It's just a safe space. You just create this because of the fact that, you're not going to completely open up your kimono to your boss, right? Or to somebody, right? So, but they have to, I think, come from salespeople are funny, right? You got to be a salesperson to coach another salesperson, right? A player knows a player, right? There's an old, I had a sales guy tell me this once. He quoted a Western. He goes, "A gun knows a gun," right? And so they won't take that coaching if it's not from somebody that understands it's kind of been in the battle, if you will, going out and going in the marketplace with a smile and in the old days, a shoe shine and knocking on doors. And, so you got to have that. But for the leaders that are listening to this, what Mike just said is critical. And I think it's my mission for 2024, and that's a good segue for us to go into what do we think about 2024.
Yep.
But to have these conversations on, these podcasts or different forums to say, let's spend time and really focus on coaching our folks and giving them the tools or giving them the tools to be the coaches to drive to where they need to go. Because that's where it all is. That's
Yeah.
where it all is.
And as we move into the 2024 discussion, you just keep this in mind. If you're asking the question, you're saying, look, coaching's not important. I don't need to do that. If my team needs coaching, they'll go out and they'll get coaching on their own. Whatever reason you might not agree with the value of coaching, it is very hard to see the entire picture when you're stuck inside the frame. And when people are in this environment, they get stuck inside the frame because they're moving from call to call, or they're moving from meeting to meeting, and they're moving from data point to data point. And you can look around the room and just hear the questions that are being asked, or the comments that are being made, or the nonverbal communication that happens to determine, am I working with a bunch of people who are saying yes to things because they are stuck inside the frame and ultimately can't see the entire picture?
I think that's so critical. I mean, I love that analogy. I'm going to steal that. I'll give you reference, right? I'll be a good ombudsman about that. But that is just so true, right? They can't see beyond the frame, and we have to give them that perspective, right? We
And
got to.
I have no idea who I stole it from. It's been
Yeah,
forgotten.
you're a bright guy. You came up with that on your morning run. But it really is so critical of giving them that frame and giving them that. And I think By doing what we've talked about on this, we will help anybody listening to it, but implementing it, solve a lot of the problems. Having really good conversations with the finance side of the business, asking the appropriate questions, wiping out fiction, right? Going to it with factual data and factual pipelines, taking off the BS for our frontline coaches and allowing them to spend time, where frontline managers allow them to spend time on coaching. And I think 2024 will be successful for organizations that do that.
So let's talk about 2024 and
Sure.
what are you excited or optimistic? What brings you optimism about 2024 as we go into the year, 12 days into the year?
So, yeah, I think we're 12 days in, and I think it's going to be a phenomenal year, right? I think it's going to be for certain industries and certain companies that don't do what we've talked about, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be horrible. But I think that's okay, right? I think that's going to clean out the marketplace, right? I think you do have a fair amount of zombie companies, right, that are kind of walking around that were propped up with PPP money, right? And just you're really their balance sheet isn't profitable. And I think either there'll be acquisitions of those or they'll fold. And I think we'll get a lot of the junk out of the pipeline. Now, the problem will be on the way down, it'll be a price, they'll just be cutting pricing trying to grab cash, right? So if you're in the marketplace of that. But listen, do we need 350,000 AI companies? No, right? And so it's going to shake itself out. It will happen over time. I think the proliferation AI is going to be better and better. What is it going to be used for and what are the successes? I don't think it's going to take over the world, right? But I do think it's going to be a better tools, and the tools are getting phenomenal. I think that I am impressed. I know it's easy to beat them up, but the younger and younger generations, I'm just impressed by them, how smart they are, how savvy they are. I've been blessed to see a lot of really good work ethic, right? I haven't seen the bad work ethic, the entitlement work ethic. And I think that you have to get to that in your interviewing process to make sure that you are interviewing the right way. I think there's going to be a new wave, there'll be another wave, unfortunately, of high level executives kind of getting cut, right? But I think that will force a entrepreneurial wave, right? So this turn will be an entrepreneurial turn, right? Of them saying to the marketplace, okay, I got an idea, let me bring it to it, or they'll get into franchises and things like that, just to kind of keep going. So those are the positives. I think that will be. I think it's going to be. Listen, we didn't fall off the cliff in 2023 like we thought we were from an inflationary standpoint, from a marketplace standpoint. I don't think we will this year. We talked a little bit about, kind of the mishigash that's going to happen with communication in the marketplace and just, the way we act as fellow citizens in 2024 towards the end. Listen, that's been around. If we go back and read our history, if I paid attention in U.S. history, which I probably should have more, that's been around since the 1600s and the 1700s. We wanted to tar and feather our political rivals and all that. So that's going to be there. There's going to be lunacy on all sides, and and I can only control one vote, and that's my vote. Right? So that's all that matters to me, right? So I'm staying out of it from the standpoint. But I think there's going to be, for those that kind of keep their head down, do what we've talked about, focus on their core business and really, really do some good things. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. We're coming off of a really low year of VC investment. I don't think M&A was where people thought it would be. So what does that check like for next year? I don't know, right? I think money's still going to be expensive, right? So that's going to put more pressures on our CFOs that we talked about, right? So they can't get money at one click of the dial or zero, right? And it's going to be now 6, 7, 8 prime plus plus, right? So what does it look like from our lending perspectives? But yeah, I mean, I'm a glass half full guy, right? Probably to my demise in many ways. But I'm always a glass half full guy. And I think it's going to be for those that focus on execution and do what you teach, Mike, and your teams teach and do what we talked about on this. I think for sales teams, it's going to be a good year. Now, I think we're going to have to be crafty, right? I think we're going to have to source deals probably from non-traditional prospects, right? Kind of look for different alternatives for who could use our products and services and go after them. And I would kind of, if I was a leader and where I'm telling my folks is, let's think of skunk works, right? It would be a skunk work and saying, who else could use our products and services? What new markets can we go after versus just doing the battle for market share, right? Of just XYZ 1, 2, 3 company and just going to bid after that. Let's change it, right? And I guess nowadays we call it the blue ocean strategy. The other day, when I was in business school, it was Skunk Works and kind of looking for different products and services or different uses of our products and services. A great book would be Rework, right? I would read that, right? Or have my teams think about that of saying, who else could use our products and services? What else can we use our products and services for? And what other industries can we really focus on? As always, I think entrepreneurs are going to figure out always a way to do it, right? I'm never, ever going to sell the United States' entrepreneurial community short, right? Small businesses will figure it out. They figured it out throughout COVID, right? It was detrimental, horrible. I'm not even going to touch how much impact we don't. I think historians will tell us how much impact it had, but we figured out a way to do business, right? We figured out a way to do what you and I are doing on Zoom. And so I think that's going to continue, right? And I think the next breed of really good entrepreneurs is out there, right? And they're figuring it out, and they're going to need help, like from ours folks. But there's good talent out there. There's good talent.
There's a couple of books to get into to reinforce a lot of the thinking that Nick shared here just over the last bit. Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull
Oh
uh,
yeah,
is phenomenal. A Medici Effect, and I forget who wrote that, but that is another phenomenal book, and it
is that
starts
the
to get into
Medici
the
family or or what?
Medici, is it MEDDCI? There we go. So now we'll have to go, we'll update that in the show notes, but the Medici Effect is a good one. Creativity Inc. is another good one. And then getting into any of Barry Diller's stuff on infinite learning is really powerful. And what this starts to do is it starts to shift your perspective around how you think about creativity and innovation, and then build on the skunk works idea. And it's not about having the entire organization go focus on something new and chase some shiny thing. It's about identifying a single person or single group of people or small group of people and having them go through and do some specific work in a specific area to go out there and test and then gather some data. Really powerful opportunities. How do you see the whole fractional world continuing to evolve over the course of the next, let's say, 3, 6, 9, even 18 months?
I think going beyond that, I think it's here to stay, and it's just going to be bigger and better,
Okay,
right?
good.
And
Okay.
I think it's you got to get away from we need everybody to be a W-2 and on our payroll, right? And so once we as an organization can get away from that thinking and saying, okay, I'm going to go out and acquire the best talent, but I only need that talent for a little bit, right? Or I can only afford that really good talent for a fraction of the thing. I think it's going to be really, really, really interesting to see how it shakes out. I think I think people would have multiple, fractional, right? You may have three or two different fractionals, let's say sales, right? Two different ones focusing on two different things.
Yeah.
And they are focused and they are driving a certain objective and they will get it done. And I think a really bright business owner or a really bright leader will be open to that, right? You might have a fractional sales coach that is really good about creating coaching platforms and teaching your middle level managers how to coach, right? And you don't need them forever, right? You just
Right.
need them to train, right? And so we're using the word fractional, and maybe it's consulting or maybe it's something else, but fractional is kind of like the in vogue word at the moment. But I think it's always going to be there. And I think, listen, if you want to go fast, go yourself. If you want to go fast and far, go with other people, and bringing fractionals in is really smart. I wish I would have done this years ago, right? Because I think it makes us better. The guys that are and gals that are in this space as fractionals, I think it makes us better because of the fact that we see so much different things and we get some think time. You and I have the benefit of having think time, which many people in organizations don't, because we have the bureaucratic mess that organizations have that we don't have to deal with, right? And you're
Right.
smiling because you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we just, think if you we are giving back the benefit of time and we're thinking about one thing, right? And that one thing is how can I be better at my craft? And how can I impart the betterness at my craft or the improvements of my craft onto the marketplace and improve my clients? And that's what we think about 24/7. So I think that's really, the kind of I think it's the future. We gotta be fair, right? We can't have a clock on our fractionals or if they're allotting us X amount of time, we can't expect them to be full-time equivalents, but only pay them
Right.
a fraction, right? So it has to be, we have to have crucial conversations and candor when you have that with clients. And I think a lot of times we get the gig and we say yes, 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 and yes. And so you get scope creep, right? And so and look at it, it's like, this isn't really profitable, right? So
Right.
and shame on me. And I'm pointing, but also holding the four fingers back at myself because I've made every mistake
Yeah.
on what I'm doing. But I think a lot there, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we do bring gets to the marketplace, right? And I think the savvy investors and companies will bring more fractional, right? If you think about it, historically, the OG of the fractional space was the CFO, right? Because you
Right.
needed really good talent, but you couldn't afford it full time, nor did you need it full time, right? Then
Right.
you started to get operational folks, COOs, right? Then you started to get, and work our space is kind of the last space, if you will. So, but I also think that there's some folks out there that shouldn't be what we are, right? You kind of look at them and you're like, oh, okay. I wouldn't put you in front of my clients. No offense, you're a wonderful person, but it's just you should probably let's get you into a real job where there's that steady paycheck and all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
that's my thought on it.
No, I think a good test for anybody who's thinking about doing fractional work or bringing on someone who does fractional work is the person that I'm bringing in, or am I as the person who doing the work? Is the person I'm bringing in testing me to see if they might be a right fit for full-time work inside my organization? Or if I'm the person providing, I'm the solution provider, am I doing this to find my next full-time role? If you are doing either of those things, testing to see if someone might be the right fit, or testing to see if someone thinks they might be the right fit inside the organization, or testing to see if that organization might be right for you, you have no business being a fractional leader inside an organization. And I think I just triggered Nick. I see the nonverbal, and I don't know if that's a good or nonverbal, because I'd
It's
love to hear what
genius.
you think. Do you? So
It was
do you?
genius. There was genius. I
Good.
never thought
Okay.
about it
Well,
that
that's
way.
good. So
Yeah, never thought about it from that perspective, but that's spot on. That's genius.
there are there are too many people who are out there looking for their next role.
Yeah,
Go work with a recruiter.
yeah.
Go as a revenue leader. Go put your sales
Knock
hat
on
on
doors. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right,
and
right, right, right.
identify
Yeah,
your ideal customer profile. Go
yeah,
out and do some outreach, test, do some discovery,
yeah.
see if you can get those calls going along, and go get a job. Don't don't play fractional. And the ones who play fractional, this frustrates me because I'm seeing it over and over again. And as we're having the conversation, it's they do the thing that Nick highlighted, which is this allow scope creep. And you kind of say, oh, you know what? I can do that. And then you start to do a little bit more and you get yourself away from your area of expertise. Own that area of expertise. Own that area of expertise.
I love that. I mean, you could, I genius. That was really, really, really well articulated and really well thought out. I never thought about it from that perspective, but you're spot on. I was networking with a fractional VP of marketing, and she had done some work that I was really, really impressed with.
Cool.
And we connected vis-a-vis LinkedIn, right? And then by the time we got to talk to each other, it turned out that had she had a client throw so much money at her that she just could not say no, right? And now then went on to their payroll by the time she and I connected. And I'm like, well, how is it? She goes, oh, I hate it. I hate it. One is as a consultant or a fractional, you could come in and you just don't have to, you got a timeline. You got the ear of the CEO and you or the owner, and you're just getting stuff done. You're just knocking through your to-do list. And so that was somebody that probably, once the contract is done, in fact, she even has so much said it to me, and I'm not obviously not going to say her name or what industry she's in or anything of that nature. She's like, I'm going back, right? But I think she is cut from the cloth of what you said, right? She is a fractional at heart. This is what she wants to do. She's a consultant at heart. She's building a book of business. She's building a practice, whatever you want to call it. She's not Lex role, which I think a lot of people are. And I think the unfortunate thing too, in the space that we're in, gets murky,
Mhm.
right? It gets
Yeah.
murky. You get a lot of people that say their business growth. I was on the business growth, and they don't even know the first thing about business growth, right? And but it's kind of sexy, and they want to be in sales because they like people, they like talking to people. It's back in the old days when people were getting into sales, right? Now they're out there running around and they're business growth specialists, things of that nature, but they've never done it. They never carried a quota. They've never had the pressure that you and I have had. And so that's going to get murky, and that's got to wash itself out. And I think it will or it won't, but it will be interesting to see what happens on so many different levels. So
Jason Lemkin, about the veins started popping out. Are you familiar with Jason Lemkin? Is that name familiar at all?
no,
Okay, so Jason Lemkin posted something. He's the CEO of SaaStr, and he posted about how fractionals never work. And could be an entire podcast of its own. Fractionals do not work in the wrong context, in the wrong operating environment. If your view of if you're in there and both parties are looking for something more out of a relationship than either of them are going to be able to provide, whatever those things are, things will not work. Whether that is marriage, whether that is a business partner, whether that is a client relationship. And I think this piece, as we're talking through it, which again wasn't going to be the focus of the conversation, but Nick, I'm happy we've gone here, is make sure you know what game you're playing. Make sure you know what game you want to play. And if you want to test, communicate that. Let people know that you want to test. You can test as a W-2 employee inside an organization and learn on somebody else's dime. You cannot test in a client environment and learn on their dime if they
no, it's
don't
not
know
fair.
it. If they
Yeah,
if they
it's
don't
not
if they
fair.
don't know it. And
Malpractice.
it's malpractice. It's malpractice, and and it brings a bad reputation to this whole space that's kind of evolving. And ultimately what it does is it sets people's business back. And that it's frustrating to see. And it happens out there. It happens out there.
But I think, listen, there's been bad advice going around business forever, right? I mean, we can't
Well,
blame the fractionals for that. It's just, there's bad consultants, there's been bad
right.
business advice forever. And, I think some of it is we as business owners allow that because we think, okay, we just checked it off. Now this person is going to be dealing with that problem. And
Right.
it goes back to we didn't have alignment in the beginning. It'd be like if you hired somebody, you didn't have alignment, right? Why do so many hires not work out? Probably because are we really that bad at hiring by this day and age, by the time we get to the level that we are in organizations? Or were we misaligned, right? Or sometimes you miss something along the way. That's, somebody has something that they're dealing with that they just are, they need to go deal with. Okay, that's fine. We're all humans and we're here to help our fellow man. But I just find it funny. You can't, I think absolutes of so and so never works or this doesn't work or this doesn't work, I think is, um, listen, I'll have to go back and read that. I want to see if you could email me that link.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you. But it's like
Yeah.
it's like dieting too. Like any exercise program is going to work.
Yeah.
Any nutrition program typically is going to work. It'll work up until a point. It'll work up into the point where you decide that you don't really need to follow it. Now you can change it because it works so well that it got you to a point where you felt healthier, more comfortable. And then those things start to not work. So all of this stuff works. The key is identifying fit. And if it's the right fit and you're willing to test, then go forward and test. If it's the wrong fit, don't manufacture it. But I will. I'll send that over to you.
I
Uh,
think too, there is a lot of bad advice that I see, right? And I think some of that is because there's so many, the platforms are so easy to communicate. There are so many companies out there saying all you need to do is produce content, right? So there's a lot of content that doesn't have context, right? And I was reading this one article. I know we're off on a tangent, but it's kind of probably what we're talking about it. And it was, you know, sometimes sales professionals are really successful in a very specific environment, and therefore they think, well, let me just take that out and become a sales trainer, right? But but they didn't realize that they were really specific at the right time in one very specific environment, selling for a phenomenal brand, right? The old analogy when I was coming up as you is no one got fired for buying IBM.
right.
Right. You
Yep.
needed to make a decision. You bought IBM, right?
Yep.
And so they come out of those logos, if you will, because
Yep.
that was the safe choice.
Right.
Nobody's going to put their career at risk by taking a flyer on a unknown brand. And then and so now they think that they had a playbook that worked for a very specific time frame, for a very specific niche customer, for a very specific industry, and that does not translate, right? And that playbook may be a little old and dated, right? And so how do you constantly improve? How do you constantly do it? Listen, I am a firm believer. We are in the sales space. We are VPs and fractional sales leaders. That's my
Yep.
business.
Yep.
If I do not make sales calls at any given point for my customers, I can never be a good sales leader. Right. I got to be on the phone. No, it's not 24/7 that I'm
Yep.
doing it, but it is so I understand it if I'm not listening. You know what I mean? So
Oh yeah.
it can't run around with a hammer and think every business problem is a nail. You need that
Yep.
toolbox. And I think, we as fractionals need to realize that. And we need to really focus on the importance. So,
Yeah. Well, and so, and you don't, and if you've made it this long into the podcast, listening to us,
oh, wow. Yeah. Right. Oh, my
rant a
gosh.
bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
and talk about a lot of the stuff that's kind of going out there. This is not a portion of the, or not an episode where we're saying don't go out there and test, don't go out there and do new things. Go out there and test, go out there and do new things, but know what you're testing, know what new things you're working on. And as Nick had said, we're grown up. Nobody got fired for hiring IBM. AT&T's was the process, or the system is the solution. I think it was their thing, or the process is
Yeah.
the solution. And if you happen to be a sales leader at Zoom in 2020 when the pandemic hit and
Yeah.
everybody had to
You're a
buy
genius.
Zoom, it wasn't your playbook that drove
Yeah.
that. It was some external forces. At least be aware of what those external forces are and look for your next pandemic opportunity. So,
Right. Because it'll be here, right? And there'll be a need, and we have to figure it out. And that's what go back to what we talked about. You got to be
yep,
crafty, right? You got to get that group thinking about where can we find new audiences. And certainly the pandemic was maybe not a once in a lifetime, but a once in X amount of year
sure.
experience. But it's really like, okay, how do you make things go? And I listen, people don't spend enough time on everything that we've talked about, all right? Being grounded in fact, being grounded in the numbers, being attaching it to a scorecard and trying to drive change, having open dialogue, right? You know, that's why goes back to the CFO, right? And they feel comfortable with numbers because numbers allegedly don't lie unless you're fudging them, right? But the numerical response of where we're at will give us the facts that we need, not the fiction that we need, and keep on pushing things through. And listen, I take my hat off to you. The work that you do is phenomenal. Your approach, is methodical, and the work you do with your clients is just so impressive. And your passion, for making people better, being a catalyst for change, right? Of really, really, really driving that, I think is something. I mean, I got three great books. I got really great perspective on the fractional world. I'm going to build that into my sales pitch when my next one. But I also, think that The stuff that you're doing in this community and the other communities that you're building is just really great work and really phenomenal. I don't even know how long it's been a phenomenal conversation. I feel bad for the people that are listening. Is your brother and my mom, right? There are only two people left, but
There you
hey,
go.
listen, we'll give them a shout out and hopefully we provided some value and hopefully people kind of come in and if they want to call BS on what we said, let's have a conversation and I'm open to learning, right? And I'm open for this is how we all get better, right? It's this that it's knowing where we are, where we want to go, and how do we get there, and being open to new things. And I love your opinion, your position of it's not saying don't try new things. It's not saying that if you have a fractional practice, don't try different things. But if you are, be open and honest, right? Of just saying, hey, listen, this is what I'm going to do. I've never done it before, but you've asked me to take it on. So I'm going to move heaven and earth to attempt to be successful in this. And as long as everybody's going to that, then it's not malpractice. It's 100% correct, right? It's like if you go to a doctor, I say, listen, this is an experimental drug. I don't know, right? The studies are showing, right? There's leading indicators that are showing X,
Right.
but I don't know if it's how it's going to affect, and we don't really know. But are you okay with that? And if the conversation is yes, then go at it, have at it, make rain. I'm
Yes.
all
Nick, awesome conversation. Thank you for saying
Mike.
all of that. Where can people find out more about the stuff you're working on?
Sure. The easiest place is just go to salesperformanceteam.com, right? Or connect with me on LinkedIn. We've got some things that we create for our clients or we create for people. If they go to salespack.salesperformanceteam.com, we'll give it to you for the show notes. And it's really, it's just some things that we've created to help people have these conversations. It's an audit, right? It's just different things, just the different boxes to think about on their sales side. It's what we do, it's what we love. And, I came from a mother that's an educator, a sister that's an educator. I taught at the graduate level and I love teaching. I just don't think I could go back and do that in this day and age, right? And so this is my ability to try to teach. And I'm blessed that you brought me on. Hopefully I impart some value for your audience. And thank you for what you're doing. And everybody that's listening, give yourselves a pat on the back for making yourselves better each and every day and getting good content.
If you know somebody who would enjoy this conversation, please share it with them. Let Nick and I both know via LinkedIn. Those shares really help amplify the message and get the messaging out there. Plus, we like to see them. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?